What's up, everybody? My name is Bryce Williams. I'm a freelance cinematographer from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And today we are going to review the Dehancer Film Emulation Program. Dehancer reached out to my production company, Chateau Rouge Cinema, to review their film emulation program. Now, I've always heard of Dehancer and I'm very familiar with the program. However, I had never used it prior until this time. And man, what can I say? I really love this program, and the reviews are true. I'm sure if you're a filmmaker or you're in the filmmaking community or just the creative community, or even in photography, you probably have heard of Dehancer. I know you have, unless you're living in a silo. And it lives up to the hype. Like, the emulation is A1. I think it's better than what one can achieve using the native tools in Resolve or any NLE. I think it's very niche and specific, but I like how granular it is in terms of the controls, and that's what we're gonna get into in this video. So let's get right into it. Okay, y'all, so I have a set of clips, and these clips I label my keeps on my drive. So from every project we do at the production company, I have a set of favorite clips or just scenes that I really like or that I'm really proud of. So I label them as keeps, put them on my personal hard drive. That way it's kind of like double backed up. So if the client hard drive fails, after a finished product where we store footage, I still have my favorites. So I chose 3 keeps from 3 separate projects, and we're gonna test Dehancer on them to see how the grading holds up. All of the source footage is from a Blackmagic Pocket 6K, and it's all Gen 5 color science. Okay, so I have Resolve open. I have my 3 clips already on my timeline, and I'm in the color tab of Resolve. So let's get into it. So first things first, I'm gonna assume that you already are familiar with your preferred NLE. I'm using DaVinci Resolve, so if you're following along with this tutorial on Resolve, I'm gonna assume you have somewhat of an idea. So once again, I'm in the color tab. So I'm gonna go to my effects tab, and when you search Dehancer, if you installed the program properly or plugin, it should pop up under effects. So I'm gonna drag Dehancer onto my first node. And the beauty of Dehancer is a lot of those different changes in terms of color correction process and the creative side of color grading are condensed into one plugin. You can still have your typical or traditional node tree with the addition of Dehancer. However, it is up to one's discretion. But for simplicity's sake, I'm going to keep it at one node, and hence I'll drag and drop my plugin already on that node. And now let's get into Dehancer. Okay, so now that we drag Dehancer on our node, as you can see, it already did some type of transform on our footage. So if I disable the node, you can see, okay, so it's already manipulating the footage. And as you can see, the reason is because under the input section, I have my source, and my source is Rec 709. However, you can go this route, but I always would prefer, in terms of using Dehancer, to choose your camera source. And if you shot on the camera, you should know what source you're working with. So once again, Blackmagic Pocket 6K for me is my source, and Gen 5 color science. Boom. So as you see, it already did our transform for us. And it even had Gen 5 color science, because that's the latest color science from Blackmagic. So it's chosen by default. And as you can see, we already have a decent grade on our footage. And I think it looks amazing for a really base grade. And under the input tab, you have your basic controls as you would in Resolve or your typical NLE. We have lift, gamma, gain, offset, and Resolve's native tools. However, in Dehancer, You have exposure compensation. So if I drag this slider, obviously it's a technical thing. So it's not necessarily creative. It's more of a technical change. So it's changing exposure over the whole image. And then temperature, obviously temperature controls. You can make the image cooler. You can make it warmer. Tint, you can introduce tint into the image. You guys get it. I love that it's all like right there in the program. You don't have to have all these individual nodes, and maybe the nodes work for people, and they work for me too. However, when it comes to using the film emulation program, such as Dehancer, simplicity scales, and it just makes life way simpler. So moving on, we have the film tab. So the film tab is where you will choose your film profile or film stock. It automatically defaults to Kodak Vision 3 250D. However, if you hit the drop-down box, man, you have so many film stocks to choose from. It's like a kid in a candy store. And you just get to choose whichever you want, whatever you find best for the project. So yeah, it defaults to Kodak Vision 3 250D. And then you can choose, for instance, 200T. And basically in the viewer, you see what changes it does to your footage. And that's 50D. I'm gonna keep it at default for now. And then there's a enabled checkbox. Obviously, if you disable it, it doesn't enable the stock. Then there's the film developer. It's disabled by default, but if you enable it, you will be able to access its controls. It has contrast boost, no question there what that does. Gamma correction, color separation, which is really important. That filmic look has color separation in the colors, and if I drag it, if you pay attention to the image, it's so subtle. But that color separation, it just makes certain colors pop and give it more of that filmic quality that people really, really like. Film compression, a lot of the scenes I have don't have too many highlights, but film tends to compress highlights in a certain way, and that's what this setting is trying to emulate within the plugin. I'll enable it anyway. Then you have expand, so you can expand your black point, white points. Then you have print, which is one of my favorites. So basically you have your film stocks, and then you have your film prints. And everybody's favorite, the Kodak 2383 print film that you can choose from the drop-down box, and the default's linear. Boom. So that's your film print, and I just think that looks absolutely amazing. That is a heck of a film emulation grade. I just think it's amazing. And obviously within the print tab or folder or whatever you want to call it section, you can manipulate it. If you maybe feel like, hey, I think it's a little bit too contrasty, well, you can go to the tonal contrast. You can lessen it, or you can increase it. Maybe you don't think it's contrasty enough. You can increase it. I'll go back to default. I think that looks amazing. Then there's color density, how dense certain colors are. And obviously saturation, it's default at 100, but if you desaturate it, you get the idea what that does. There's also the color head section. So with the color head section, it's disabled by default, but you can enable it, of course. And you have yellow, blue, magenta green, and cyan red. You can gang them all together. If you gang them, they're all linked together. So whenever you move one, they all move in tandem. And when you reset, they reset in tandem. And then if you disable the gang, then you can adjust these parameters individually. So obviously yellow goes more yellow, blue goes towards more blue. And as you can see, it's affecting the midtones and a little bit of shadows. And if I reset, for instance, I can go more magenta, more green. So that's the color head. You can play around with specific color ranges. And then obviously everyone's favorite, there's film grain. And like most film emulation programs, there's a plethora of film grain you can choose from. It looks good. Like I can't say it's like massively better than, you know, some other or the native film emulation plugin in your preferred NLE. However, what I can say, it's amazing. Like I haven't noticed any artifacts, anything out of the ordinary that I disliked. It's a really, really good plugin. The next is halation. A warning note: if you're, it's disabled by default, and I have a sneaky suspicion that's on purpose. That's because this thing will tank your system. So if your laptop or your desktop, if you know you don't have the RAM to handle that process, maybe you want to enable it at the tail end of a project. Because if you enable it, it's gonna eat some resources from your system and it might slow your computer down. So I'm gonna enable it. And it's so subtle. So if I disable it and then enable it, it's so subtle. And there's not too many like crazy highlights in this scene, but the halation gives off a really, really nice glow that I like from the plugin. And I think it does a better job of halation than other film emulation plugins. Then there's bloom. So that's blooming of the highlights. And then you have all these other like niche, I say niche because like other film emulation programs don't go this far. So you can have film damage, film breath, gate weave, like what? You can have an overscan, so like the little overscan overlay, so if I enable it. What? That is absolutely ridiculous that you even have that option or that as a choice. And once again, they're disabled by default, which is understandable because these can be creative choices that you choose. And one of my favorite things about this plugin is the vignette. What I like to do with my color grades is, you know, once I'm done color grading and for instance, like a scene, maybe I want to draw emphasis to a particular subject in a scene or a particular area of a frame, you can enable a vignette to draw attention to it and it just puts a little bit more focus. And then there's a mask mode button that lets you define the mask and where that focus is. So you can play with the size, you can feather it to smooth it out. And you can also drag it within the viewer. And I absolutely love that. So you can control it on the right side, but you can also drag it in the viewer. And I think that's absolutely crazy. And then you can just adjust it. Moving on, after the vignette, you have the monitor section, which I really like because now you can apply something like false color and you can basically measure and read exposure while doing your grade. You know, maybe you feel like, hey, you added too much contrast in one of the sections. Well, you could go down to the monitor section, slap on false color, and you can pretty much judge for yourself. And there's clipping information, so it'll tell you if anything in your image is clipping. So I'm gonna move on and grade these other two clips real quick using Dehancer. And I think I did a brief synopsis of the Dehancer plugin. Y'all, it's really that simple. It's not rocket science, and I think that's why I like this plugin so much. It's intuitive, right? Anybody could really pick it up, drag and drop it on the footage, and they can use it simplistically. There's no crazy settings or confusing settings. It's all right there at the touch of your fingertips. It's simple and it's easy to use, and honestly, that's all you can really ask for in terms of a plugin, especially when it comes to something as taboo as color grading. It's like this mystical thing that like only like the select few are really good at, but this program allows people to take those first steps and allow color grading or even film emulation to not be so scary. So I applied Dehancer in that aspect. Okay, so moving on. So now we're on the next image. I already applied Dehancer to the node, singular node. And once again, I know my source footage. So instead of the default source being Rec 709, I'm gonna go to choose camera. I'm gonna go to Blackmagic Design, Cinema Camera 6K, Film Gen 5, and already it has a decent Rec 709 conversion. And I don't think that looks half bad. Needs a little bit of contrast, however, it's decent, enough for you to kind of build off of. So once again, you can choose your film stock. Obviously, I recommend doing a little bit of color correction first. Maybe you feel like something's underexposed or overexposed technically, and then you move into the different sections that the Dehancer plugin has to offer. So I'm just gonna go ahead and skip down to my film print. Obviously, default is linear, so I'm gonna go to Kodak 2383, film print. And voila, look at that. It adds some nice contrast, some nice color separation. And look at the skin tones, like look at the highlights on the skin tone. I just think it looks so good and pleasing. And once again, you know, if you're not happy with what it does by default after you apply it, you have the settings to change. You can change white point or like exposure. So this is changing exposure from perspective of the print. And then the exposure at the top of the input source tab is a more technical version. And then once again, you have color head, film grain. You can choose the different film grains you want and what ISO, which is crazy. I think it's so niche and it's so niche and specific, but I really love that. I'm gonna keep it at 35 millimeter. I'm gonna add halation. I love the halation in this program and the boom. And I typically stay away from things like film breath, gate weave, overscan, but the fact that it's there as a choice, like perfect. It's just perfect. And honestly, y'all, for a base grade, I think that looks amazing. There's so much more you can do to the image. I can go to Film Developer, I can go to Enable, so now that Film Developer is enabled, and I can go to Color Boost, and look at those skin tones, like the saturation and vibrancy in the skin tones, like all from just dragging Color Boost. I'm gonna reset it, I'll do it again. Boom. And it could be subtle, it doesn't have to be too crazy. I mean, look at that. That looks crazy good. Lastly, we have this third clip, which is also one of my favorites. It's actually one of my first spec projects that I've worked on. It was a Spotify spec. So I want to do something a little different. I want to just apply what I did in the previous clip to this third clip, and I'm just curious and see what we get. Okay, not too bad. I think a little bit oversaturated, so I'm gonna go to my color boost and I'm gonna tone it down. I'm gonna reset it. And man, for a base grade, something you could work off of, how do you beat that, especially in terms of film emulation? All right, y'all, so that's my review of Dehancer. I cannot stress how great this plugin is. It truly does live up to the hype. If you go to dehancer.com, there is a free trial, so you can try out this plugin. I really suggest you do. See for yourself, see how great it is. Test it on your footage, see if you like it. And I know you'll like it, I know you'll love it. In the link in bio of this video, there will be a discount code to get 10% off Dehancer. I think you should use it because honestly, it's worth it. And you're gonna wanna continue using this program, especially if you're chasing after the film emulation look. But also as just a basic grade plugin, I think it's great. You don't even have to use the grain or halation or all those other things. You can literally use it to get a nice decent grade with film stocks and go from there. But hats off to Dehancer, really, really great plugin, and I'm gonna be using it for a long, long time, especially on future projects to come because it just makes life so easy. But once again, my name is Bryce Williams. Thanks for watching this video. Pick up Dehancer and see you in the next one.